Now, what I will try to do over the next 24 minutes is to show you where we stand today with regard of the benefit risk assessment, the benefit risk as well evaluation, as we do it in the CHMP. Now, I just emphasize as we do it in the CHMP because I would like to remind you first of all that EMA and CHMP is not all there is, it's a bigger world than that. We do have split responsibilities in the EU, meaning for innovative new products, those will practically always go into the CHMP and we will have the benefit risk assessment there. In parallel to that, we got quite a number of national competent authorities who deal with the bulk, with a huge quantity of generic products and do their own benefit risk assessment there. Yeah? Parallel procedures with regard to licensing pre-approval. The same is true after approval, post-licensing. There again we have parallel things. It is true even for generics, if there is a safety issue, this will come up to EMA, will in the end up at CHMP for referrals, and we had a nice discussion yesterday that we should include that in our activities with patient representatives more closely. But in parallel, for the factual access of patients to the products, you need to keep in mind licensing is not everything. Reimbursement decisions, pricing decisions are made not on a European level, but on a frequently national, sometimes even regional level, and may be very crucial for the question, does the patient really get the medicine? Yeah? We'll come back to that later and see how that fits in our overall context. Now, where are we today and how do we do things at CHMP today? I'll try to do that in two different parts. First, the principles, and then highlighting where are currently the limitations and where, in the second part, would we like to go for there for the future. Benefit risk decisions are fairly standardized. What we expect from any applicant, usually from a company, is to provide evidence for the efficacy. The standard should be 2 pivotal studies, and provide evidence for the safety of the product, preclinical and clinical data. That's it. Benefit, risk. I would like to make it very clear. Economics, the price of the product, the cost of the overall treatment, the economic consequences, reimbursement decisions are not a topic, are not considered, and as a matter of fact, indeed, usually we don't even know what the price will be in the end. The benefit risk decision as we do it has two major parts. The first one, and that is, I wouldn't say the easy one, but the less difficult one, is to describe what has been done so far. That is important. I think we provide the first impartial description of benefits and risks based on what has been done during development. And again, highly standardized. The assessors are supposed to stick to a special format that is available, and transparency is very important for us. Very in small print down at the line you see on the EMA webpage, you can see how the assessment is supposed to be, what are the subheadings, what are the assessors to consider in those subheadings to make it completely transparent what goes in there. Well, first of all, description, benefits and risks. The second one is a more tricky one. Now, it's not only the description, it is a value judgment. It is quite easy to say, well, the description says that we have an overall survival median time of 25 months, or that we have a hospitalization time from 6 weeks or whatsoever. That's a description. The difficult thing is to rank that, to assign importance to that, and most difficult then to weight the benefits against the risks. Yeah? This is clearly beyond a pure descriptional approach, but again, it's done highly standardized according to the guidelines, and I really recommend for whoever is interested to have a look at those guidelines for the assessors, how that is been done. Transparency is here, and I can assure you most companies certainly look at that because it's very helpful for them if they know what they should bring to get a clear, straightforward assessment. The description can be very objective, and usually efficacy endpoints are quite descriptional. We have that, I'm giving you here the example of oncology, where we have in the oncology guideline clearly specified the most relevant endpoints we would like to see for efficacy is cure rate, the time of overall survival, and or the time for progression-free or disease-free survival. You do realize that those are very objective, measurable parameters. They do not depend on patient's perception. Yeah? Overall survival, death or alive, is not a matter of perception, but very, very clear. Yeah? That goes for the benefits. It gets more difficult with the risks. With regard to the risks, we depend very much on what we get reported by patients or doctors. It's more difficult to predefine that. Therefore, we will look at everything that comes in. What are the adverse effects? How frequent are the adverse effects? And finally, we will have a grading. How severe are the adverse effects? Again, there is a huge effort to try to standardize that, to make it comparable, to get an objective quantification. That's one of the ways to grade that you have seen here on the slide. You will look how important is the impact on the daily life activities of the patients. But I would like to remind you, this grading is trying to be objective, but may not reflect patient's perspective. Yeah? Grade 1 and grade 2 adverse effect may be dramatic for one patient and might be quite tolerable for another. Yeah? We need to keep that in mind, that even in the description here, there's an individual factor included. So, based now on this description and then the effort to weight the benefits and the risks, we go into the benefit-risk balance. And one of the most important things I would like to tell you today, I would like to take you with you today, is we need to discriminate, we need to distinguish between the regulatory decision on benefit risk, that is a group decision, where we look at all the patients that were in the studies and we sum up all the benefits on one side in all patients and all the risks on the other hand in those patients on the other side to come to something. The regulatory overall decision, which is quite different from the very individual treatment decision that is only for one clearly defined patient. Please realize, and I tried to illustrate that here, on the top you see the regulatory decision, all benefits of all patients versus all risks of all patients. If you break that down to individuals, here, for example, with 3 different individuals, you see it's still the same benefit and risks, some heavy, some less heavy, And for 2 of the patients, it is clearly, even for them, the individual benefit-risk balance is positive. However, there's 1 patient included, right low corner, where obviously the risks overweight the benefits. Yeah? That doesn't change the overall regulatory decision. The sum is still positive. Now, what does that mean? That depends what those negative effects, those negative benefit risks are, whether they are, one thing, predictable. That's the easy one. If you can predict patients with this or that pre-existing disease, with this or that genotype, whatever it is, if that is predictable with this or that disease stage, won't benefit, will have too many adverse effects. If that is predictable, that is easy, then we will contraindicate that. And that plays back into the regulatory decision that is modified to exclude those patients, and accordingly we got a new modified indication. It's more complicated if it's not predictable. If we can't know in advance who are the patients that will have prohibitive, strong adverse effects. Yeah? It may well be that we have to say, okay, we don't know in advance, we need to treat, and then we will have to find out the hard way and then stop treatment in those patients. Yeah? We can have that regulatory if we define stop treatment criteria and that kind of thing, but in the end it can't be helped. They stay in, they take the risk, but the overall regulatory decision benefit risk remains as it is, overall positive. So that is first part, current state, where are we? And so far that works seemingly, repeat, seemingly nicely and easily. Now, where are the true limitations and where do we struggle? We struggle when the weight of a benefit, when the weight of an adverse effect, of a risk, depends very much on the individual judgment, on the individual perception. That is something we cannot make for all the patients. Yeah? If it is an objective thing, we can describe it, but how that is weighted is not clear. And here you have the example, again, trying to illustrate that. Whether the benefit-risk balance is positive or negative will, for the patient on the left side, depend whether he or she perceives this issue as a huge benefit or says, oh, well, that's not that impressive. Or this example here, whether a given adverse effect, a given risk, is accepted by the patient, saying, oh, well, I can live with that, or says, no, for me, this is prohibitive. If that is a risk, I won't take that. Yeah? And that will be different, and that is the biggest challenge, to get that into a regulatory working. But to remind you, that is in the end the treatment decision, and this final decision will always be with the patient and with the physician. To give you an example here that is quite impressive is adverse effect, irreversible loss of hair. A real life case, we are talking here about an adjuvant cancer treatment, meaning a treatment that will improve the probability of a cure, of long-term survival, whereas loss of hair, even permanent, is maximal a grade 2, doesn't severely limit the daily activities of a patient, is maximally a grade 2 adverse effect. Therefore, for a regulator, it is always clear if I have something that may be life-saving, yeah, that may cure cancer, that may increase the cure rate of cancer, on the one hand, and an adverse effect grade 2 or even grade 1 on the other side, no matter, benefit risk will be positive. However, patients do see that quite differently. We got here the original quotations from patients who tell me, well, the loss of hair was for me much more dramatic than the loss of the breasts, who clearly say, no, this risk, permanent hair loss, is prohibitive for me. I won't take, or I would not have taken, this potentially life-saving therapy if I had known that before. Yeah? We may not share that, let's face it. For me, the perspective of losing the hair is not that dramatic. But that doesn't mean that we need not accept different decisions. Yeah? Yeah, a reminder, accept the different decisions. The final decision has to be with the patients. How does it work? Now, that would be the classical combination. The regulatory decision remains positive. Overall, we do see a positive benefit risk. But for at least a few patients, there is one risk in there, for example, the hair loss, if you want to stay with that is prohibitive, too severe for them. Well, then those patients opt out. That is what they do even today. They say, yes, the drug is on the market. We discuss that with my physician, and it is my informed decision. I'm not willing to take this risk. I'm not taking this very medicine. Works, opt out. Now, it should work the other way as well. It should work if we overall see there as a negative decision, but for a few patients, a minority of patients, there could be a positive treatment decision because they think that a special benefit is so overwhelming, they are willing to accept a lot of risks for that. Yeah? A minority of patients. Overall, benefit risk stays negative. They would like to have this treatment. Well, the appropriate thing for them would be analogous to the opt-out we had before, an opt-in. However, you realize usually that won't work. I say usually, there are some ways around, but usually a regulatory decision, if it's negative, the product won't be marketed, won't be available. Even if it is available, it won't be reimbursed, and so on and so forth. Now that is a challenge. Opt-out is not a problem. Opt-in for patients against the regulatory decision is a real challenge. So, if that is where we are today, where will we go? I think we do realize increasingly, all colleagues realize increasingly, to a different degree possibly, that marketing authorization, the regulatory decision, is not an end in itself. It's not what it's all about, but it is just one step in the whole development. One decision step, but we have to realize there are others, and we have to put that in the context. I gave you shortly an overview here. All the decisions, the first one will be usually by industry. Do we want to develop the product in the first place? The next one will be in the clinical development. Does it make sense? Do we still think we can go along? Then comes the marketing authorization. Then, increasingly important, price and reimbursement decisions. And finally, and I think most importantly, we should keep that in mind, the individual treatment decision. Yeah? You realize that those decisions are a sequence, usually. There are exceptions, but we can discuss that maybe in the coffee break later. There are exceptions, but usually it's a sequence. If a prior decision is negative, the others won't have the chance to decide. Yeah? The whole thing stops. So I said I give you a view how we will do in the future, where the development is going from the regulator's perspective. We do need to realize, I repeat, that we are just one step in a multi-step process. But what we can do, and the most important thing probably, will be to provide the first impartial assessment of the benefit risk. The overall picture, taking into account all data, confidential or published, and give that description to the scientific community, patients, physicians, and the subsequent decision makers. Doing that, the regulators will need to understand that their decision is not the end of it. It's not the final crucial one, but it's just a stepping stone. That's why we need to invest great care in giving a rationale why our decision is positive or negative, how we came to that decision. And we have to make clear that, and we have to make sure that the rationale is comprehensible for non-regulators, for scientists, for physicians, and for patients and consumers. Doing that, we need to realize that the subsequent treatment decision may be different from the decision we made. Yeah? And therefore, we need, in the judgment, give room for divergent value judgments to open for subsequent decision makers on a society level, reimbursement, on a personal level, patients, give room for decisions that may be different from that we provide. Yeah? Finally, remembering the common ultimate goal, the benefit for the individual patient. I cannot emphasize strongly enough, none of those decision steps is an end in itself. In the end, it is the individual patient and the benefit of the individual patient that is important. Well, that adds up, if you take the first letters of those topics, to a very smooth and nice regulator that is purring. But apart from that, I think I could give you an overview where we stand and where we expect to go. Thank you.